Okay, how many of you were here last night and heard me last night? Just about everybody? Okay, so I'm going to repeat that same story again. No, I'm only kidding. Here's what we're going to do this morning. I'm going to talk about a few things, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And I'm not sure how that's going to be handled, whether there'll be a mic or you put the question in early. I'm not sure. But we'll open it up for a Q&A. And guys, you can ask me anything that you want. I've been asked everything under the sun. I promise you won't offend me. And if I don't want to answer, I know how to take the fifth. I've done that many times in my life, so we're okay with that. But, you know, I want to explain the whole Goodfellas thing because I get asked about that all the time. Let me tell you what happened. That was a different crew. It was a different family. It wasn't a Colombo. It was a different family, right? Lucchese guys. And so I get out of prison, and Goodfellas comes out. So I told my wife, I said, honey, let's go see that movie. Now, you got to understand my wife. She doesn't read anything about me. She doesn't want to look at the documentary. She doesn't do it. She said, I had enough. I lived through it. I'm good, right? She didn't want to know anything. I said, can we go and see that movie? I knew all the guys. I said, you know, little nostalgia. She said, okay. So we get in the theater, and I'm a popcorn guy, and I don't share my popcorn. I tell my wife, you want, I'll give you a box, and you can have your own, but I like my own popcorn, right? It's part of the experience. So I'm sitting there, I'm eating my popcorn. For those of you who've seen Goodfellas, you know how it opens up. Pretty graphic, stabbing people, putting them in the trunk of the car, you know, stuff like that. So I knew I was in trouble. She looks at me, you know, after a few minutes, and she says, I have to ask you a question. We're in the theater. I said, what's that, honey? She said, is this what your life was really all about? Is this what you did? So I'm eating my popcorn. I says, it's a movie. It's Hollywood. They make things up. I said, you know what it is, dramatic liberty they take. I said, don't pay attention. Just watch the movie, right? No sooner I say that, than the restaurant scene comes up, and there's Michael Franzese. She looks at me and says, let's go, honey. We're out of here, right? We got up and left because I had no idea that I was in that film. Because, like I said, it was a different crew. I knew all of those guys. So the writer, I knew Nick Pileggi really well. So I got home and I called him up. I said, Nick, why didn't you tell me you put me in that film? He said, I said, a different crew. It wasn't my. He said, you have name value. You knew all those guys, so I put you in there. I said, well, you could at least tell them to say my name correctly, you know, anyway. But that's the story. She never watched the whole movie, and I will never take her to one of those movies ever again. But that's the deal with Goodfellas. But, you know, I have to relay another story. And by the way, you know, anytime I'm up here, it's all about my faith, people. I always mix it in with everything that I do. I've been really blessed, you know, and I'm very, really encouraged to see this. Whenever I go and do a secular event, a ticketed event, you know, when we open it up for a Q&A, I always bring my faith into it, always, because that's my story. Without that, what am I doing here? And every time they do open it up for a Q&A, you'd be surprised that I would say more of the questions asked really have to do with my faith, really have to do with how did your wife endure this time when you were away for 8 years? How did your kids respond to you when you came home? And what it made me realize is that people, you can be in a whole different level. I was in the mob at one point in time, but we all go through the same thing in a different way. And people relate to that. How do you relate to your kids? How do you relate to people in the community? You know, this is what happened, that's what happened. And people are very curious about that. And the reason I say that is don't be afraid to ask things like that. You know, it's personal, but it's not personal. That's how we share our faith. That's fellowship. And so I always bring it into wherever I'm going, and people seem to appreciate that. And that's the platform that God has given me, and I really appreciate that. I want to tell a little story. I was in the United Kingdom just a couple of weeks ago, and I was on tour there. It was a ticketed event, a secular event. We had 9 events in different cities throughout throughout England, Ireland, and Scotland. Prior to going there, I went into Romania. Now, how many of you have heard of Andrew and Tristan Tate? Do you know who the Tate brothers are? Okay. For those of you, probably the older guys like me originally, they're probably the second or third biggest content creators, or what do you call them, you young guys, on the internet. Everybody knows who they are. They got millions of followers, right? And they really have a message out to young men about being men. They're a little bit off base the way they deliver the message sometimes, and a lot of the things that they say were taken out of context, I believe. And there's been a lot of controversy about them. So I've been speaking to the main guy, who's out there all the time, Andrew Tate. And they're in their late 30s, very, very successful, worth millions of dollars now. And I've been speaking to them for about a year. They're under indictment in Romania for alleged human trafficking and things like that. Supposedly they lured girls into a relationship and then put them on that site OnlyFans. And I don't know if you heard about that. It's kind of a legal, almost, I wouldn't call it pornographic, but it's bordering on that. And so they have a lot of trouble in Romania. So I've been talking to them, and people, my position, I try to research things pretty good before I condemn somebody. Condemn is the wrong word, before I pass judgment. Well, my judgment on just about everybody is that you're innocent until proven guilty. I'm sorry, this is my experience. I know how the government operates. I know that people sometimes get accused if you're against the grain, if you're not, conforming to the ideology that's out there. So that's just my position. Innocent until proven guilty. Everybody deserves their day in court. So I go and interview them. Spent the weekend with them, my wife and daughter, myself, and they invited me into their compound. We did some great interviews. They're up on the internet. You can look at them. I'm sure some of the young guys have seen them already. And it was great. So from there, I'm going over to the United Kingdom. I didn't post the video yet. We had just done it. I posted a picture of me and the boys, my wife and my daughter. Well, when I got to the United Kingdom, you would not believe what happened. There was a woman in Parliament who was part of the alternative lifestyle deal, LGBTQ, whatever that, the alphabet, whatever they call it. And she was very offended by the fact that I said they were innocent until proven guilty, and very offended by the fact that I associated with them. So she went in front of Parliament and said that I should be banned from coming into the country, okay? And she actually threatened, this is a true story, and you can go, it's on YouTube, her Parliament speech that she made. She actually threatened every venue and said, if you have this guy's event, we're going to pull your business license. 8 out of the 9 venues got scared, and they canceled the event. Now, this has been going on for months. A lot of ticket holders, these were sold-out events. So these ticket holders now, they don't know where to go. The promoters come to me and they say, Michael, what do you want to do? I said, we got a lot of trouble. I said, well, first of all, calling me a misogynist? I said, I'm married 39 years to a very independent Christian woman, and I have 5 very independent daughters. I said, I'm anything but a misogynist. If you took a peek at my house, you'd say, this was a mob guy? Come on, these women got it all over him. So I said, no, I'm not going to stand for that. I said, if you guys can get new venues, then let's do it. To make a long story short, I actually challenged the woman. I said, listen, there's a place in Scotland called George Square where everybody airs out their grievances, protesters going there, peacefully protest. And I aired it out on social media. I said, I would like to invite you to George Square to come and talk to me because you got the wrong impression. I said, I'm anything but a misogynist. Well, she didn't come. She wouldn't do that. But we ended up getting every event done. Within 24 hours, the promoters went out, and somehow they had to go to 2 or 3 or 4 events before they got it done. But it really backfired on them because we had even more people coming, standing room only. We had to turn people away because normal people were very offended by what she did. And, I really did get a chance to really preach the gospel. And there was one part in there, and I'm sure you young boys know it, where I was preaching the gospel to Andrew Tate. He was a Christian that turned Muslim. And we had a discussion, and that little clip, out of the whole interview, that clip has already gotten over 50 million views in various places that have taken that and just put it on their own site. And it's maybe about 5 or 6 minutes that I was really sharing the gospel with him. So the point is, every opportunity that you have to share the gospel with anybody, you don't know what kind of an impact it's going to have. And like I said, 50 million views, God knows where God is going to take that. And I don't even know that on YouTube, they can take all your material and use it and put it anywhere. So this particular clip has been shown, like I said, over 50 million views, and I'm sure it'll keep going. So, yes. And the thing was that I had been on tour in the United Kingdom. I visited 10 or 12 churches there, and then I did ticketed events. And she didn't even look at my past, speeches or whatever that I gave. She just labeled me, and that was it. But, that's what the world is all about, people. They're always trying to come after you if you have a message. But what does the Lord say? You deny me in front of your people on earth, I'll deny you in front of my Father in heaven. So we can never do that. We have to stand up for our faith. We have to do it the right way. We have to be bold about it. We don't have to be an in-your-face person, but we have to be bold and secure and confident in doing that. And I want to tell you this. Last night we touched upon this a little bit, but I want to talk about these defining moments in our life. How we don't even realize that God is doing things to prepare us when He has His design on us, and we pick up on that. How He prepares us for things to come. And I want to tell you, I have many defining moments in my life that I believe God was preparing me for what He would have me do later on. And one of them was extremely significant. I want to talk about that. One of the horrors of the mob life is that you make a mistake, you don't really know it, you're not sure, your best friend walks you into a room, and you don't walk out again. And unfortunately, in my 20-plus years on the street, I've seen that happen. And it's a really tough deal, guys. It really is. And, my father taught me a lot of things growing up. My dad really gave me some good advice. He said some things to me that really helped me later on in life, helped me through that life, and helps me now. He told me, he says, Mike, remember this. He says, don't ever be the first person to judge somebody, especially harshly. He says, because when your time comes, and in this life, it's going to come. It's going to happen. People are going to remember how you judge somebody else. If you judge harshly, if you were the first one to condemn, well, when your time comes, people are going to remember that, and that's going to backfire on you. So he told me, always be the last one to pass judgment. And I practiced that throughout my time, until today. He also told me, he said, Mike, be a good listener. He said, be a good listener. He said, don't shoot your mouth off right away. In this life, you shoot your mouth, you say the wrong things, very dangerous. Consequences are a lot more severe in that life. You have to really be careful. You have to know how to navigate through that life, especially if you're a high-profile guy. And served me very, very well, always. I always like to listen, let people talk, and then I can respond intelligently. He said another thing to me. He says, Michael, the best way to defeat your enemies, make them your friends. He said, best way. Is even if they're not really your friends, if they think that they're your friends, you can keep them under control. And he said, obviously, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Once you make them your friends, then just keep them close so you can keep an eye on them, All of these things have helped me really tremendously throughout my life, even till today. But there was a time when I was making a lot of money on the street, I'll be honest with you, and there was a newspaper article that came out in Long Island. I believe it was in the Long Island Press. And it said I was becoming powerful enough to break away from the Colombo family and start my own family. I was a captain at that time. I had a big crew, and we were making a lot of money. And my father was on the street at that point. My father still had a lot of juice also. We were both captains at that point. We were equal rank. And there was one day when he called me. He was on parole. He was home in Long Island, and he said, son, I have to see you. So I go see him. We're in the driveway of his home. And he says, Mike, the boss wants to see us tonight, Persico, Jr. I said, okay, Dad, what time you want me to pick you up? And he said, because, I always drove him around because he kept getting violated, so I tried to protect him. I didn't have a record at that time. Even though I had been to trial several times, I was always acquitted. I said, what time do you want me to pick you up? He said, well, they want to do this differently. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, they want me to come in first, and they want you to come in second. I said, why? I said, why would they do that? He said, well, this is what they want. I said, well, Dad, we're not going to do that. I said, the talk on the street. They had tried to visit some of my Russian partners, and they were questioning him, because people get nervous. In that life, when there is a war, families don't war with each other. It's always a civil war, and it's always for power. Somebody wants to be the boss, or they want to take over. So it's an internal war. It's never a war among the families. That stopped when Luciano made the commission and put everything at peace. So I said, Dad, you know what they're doing. I said, they're watching us. I said, we're not going to do that. Because in the Colombo family, we had really two factions. We had the Persico faction, and we had the Franzese faction. If my dad doesn't go to prison, he would have been the boss, because he was the underboss. So we still had those factions. I had a big crew. I said, Dad, we're not going to do that. I said, why would we let them separate us? I said, let's go together. He said, we can't do that. We've been given an order. My dad always following the orders. I said, no, but we're not listening to that, Dad. Let's go in together. I don't want them to separate us. Well, he was very adamant. I never really had an argument with my dad until that night. We were going at it, going at it, going at it. He would not move. Finally, I threw up my hands and I said, you know what, Dad? I've been listening to you all my life. I don't like this, but if this is what you want, fine. We'll do it that way. So I leave. I said, who's going to pick you up? He said, don't worry, I'll get in there. I said, okay. So I leave. I get a call from another captain, Jimmy Angelina, his name was. He's passed on, so I can talk about him. And he says, Michael, meet me in such and such a place. I had to drive into Brooklyn. The boss was on parole, so this had to be a covert meeting. We had to make sure we weren't followed, right? Because we're always being followed. So I drive into Brooklyn. I park my car. Jimmy's waiting there. And I get in the car. There's a guy sitting in the back seat. Now, I recognized him. He wasn't a maid guy. He was an associate, but I recognized him. I finally said, what is he doing here? I didn't say that to Jimmy. I said it to myself. And so I get in the car. Hello. Now, I knew Jimmy my whole life. We were captains together. He was part of the, Franzese faction. So we're driving, and we're making sure we don't have a tail on us, and I'm waiting for Jimmy to tell me what this is all about. Well, he don't talk to me. Talks to me about the Yankees. Now, I'm a diehard Yankee fan. I didn't want to hear about the Yankees that night. I wanted to know what was up, right? So we drove for about 20 minutes, made sure we didn't have a tail on us, and finally we pull up to the house in Brooklyn, and we parked the car. It was a summer night in August. It was late at night, and we get out of the car, and I get out, and Jimmy gets out, and I believe he comes behind me, and then I hear the doors slam on the other side, figuring that guy in the back seat got out too. And I'm saying, why is this guy coming into the meeting? He's an associate. What is he doing here? Now, let me explain this to you guys. And I know this is harsh, but I'll lead up to something. In that life, if you have to prove yourself and you have to do any work, you're an associate, they bring you in on something. So now I'm saying, is this guy here? Is he being tested? Is something going to happen tonight? Now, I want to tell you this. It was about a 30-yard walk from the car down to the basement apartment where we had to go in this guy's house. And all of a sudden, I'm getting really scared. I said, something's going down here. Now, I'm going to tell you this. When I tell this story, I can smell the fragrance of the flowers, and I can see the fireflies that night in New York. We had a thing going with fireflies back then. My senses got so high because I said, I think I might get killed here tonight. And I was scared. I knew the setup. And as I'm walking down there, my heart is starting to beat out of my chest. I'm starting to think, this is really that bad? I'm thinking, what happened to my father? Did he go in here first? All these emotions start coming in. And then I started to pray. Now, I wasn't a religious guy, but I realized at that moment, when you think you're going to meet your maker, you pray. And I'm starting to pray, and I'm getting really nervous. And somebody said to me once, Michael, why didn't you cut and run? I said, you know what, guy? It wasn't heroic. It was more robotic. I was so much a product of that life at that point. I just said to myself, hey, if this is it, this is it. I didn't still, that macho thing. I didn't want to show anybody that I was scared. And I'm walking down those steps. And I knew the setup, guys. That door opens, it would have been really quick. I'd have been gone. I don't know how I didn't faint when I got to the door and the door opened, because they must have seen it on my face. I was scared, but that's what the intent was, no doubt. And we go in. Obviously, I'm here, so that didn't happen. But we go in, and we sit down, and they start grilling me about the gas business, and this and that and everything else. And I started getting angry with the boss. And the boss and the underboss, Jerry Lang, was there, and I started to get angry. My father wasn't there. And I looked at them and I said, hey, I'm bringing you guys $2 million a week. This was my scam. I created this. I said, and you're questioning me now because of a newspaper article? I said, all of a sudden, because it said like we defrauded the government out of $2 billion or something like that. It wasn't $2 billion. It was a lot of money. It Well, it was close, but it wasn't $2 billion, right? But anyway, so I started to get angry. I said, all of a sudden, when they write about you guys, it's a lie. When they're writing about me, it's true. And I started to get angry. You never outshine the master, guys. Remember that rule. Never outshine the master. So now I started to catch myself because I don't want to get in trouble being disrespectful with the boss. You go from the frying pan into the fryer. So I backed off. And after we were finished, okay, Mike, we're satisfied. Bob, everything is good. No problem. Have a glass of wine. You know, they hugged the whole bit. Honestly, I just wanted to get out of there. I was so aggravated with the whole thing. I said, Jimmy, drive me back to my car. I got a long ride out to Long Island. We get in the car. Now, I knew Jimmy all my life. I was so angry with him because he didn't prepare me for anything. I turned around to him. I was ready to blast him verbally, right? And he says, stop. Don't say anything. I said, what do you mean? He said, I got to tell you something. I said, what? I'm mad. He said, you held yourself up pretty good in there tonight. He said, this was a real problem, Michael. It really was. When he told me that, I got even more upset with him. I said, you knew this? I know you my whole life. You're ready to walk me into a room. You knew this and you don't prepare me. You don't tell me anything? Smart guy. He stopped. He turned around. He looked at me and he said, if it was the other way around, would you have told me? I thought about it for a minute. I said, no. He said, Mike, you know this life as well or better than anybody. You grew up in it. And I was thinking about it. I said, man, this was so close here, my best friend. And we're driving. I didn't say another word. And then we get to where my car is, guys, and this was the killer. I go to get out of the car. I didn't even say goodbye. He grabs my arm and he says, Michael, I want to tell you something. And I said, what? He said, you're not going to like this. He said, I am your friend, and you can take this to the bank. Those were his exact words. I said, what? He said, your father was in there before you tonight. He didn't help you one bit. He hurt you in there. Guys, when I heard that, first of all, I was stunned. I didn't even know how to respond to him. I didn't respond. I got out of the car. I just looked at him, and I got out of the car, and I'm walking back to my car, and I said, what in the heck did he mean by that? And then knowing my father so well, God gave me clarity at that moment, and I said, okay, I know what he did. My father still had a lot of juice, but when they questioned him, I don't know what my son is doing. I'm on parole. I don't handle the business. He handles everything. If money is gone, you got to talk to him. Instead of defending me, and I don't think you can probably not grasp how important it was for him to defend me that night. Instead of defending me, kind of threw me under the bus, washed his hands of it. And as I'm walking away, I said, man, if this life can separate father and son, what do we really have here? Well, I got back in my car. I never said a word. You don't speak out of turn in that life. I never said a word. It wasn't until 2 years later that I met my wife. But I kept that all inside. But guys, I want to tell you this. If that incident did not happen, I don't think I would have walked away from that life, even for my wife. Because my bond with my father was so tight. And I didn't want to betray him or make him not be proud of me. And what I realized later on is that God had to break that bond with my earthly father in order that he can work through me as my heavenly father. So a defining moment. Now, that was serious and obviously very intense, but think about your own life. God wants to get your attention somehow, some way. You know, also when he put me in solitary for 29 months and 7 days, worst time of my life to be in that hole. If you ask me about it, guys, I can't even differentiate 1 second from the other. It was one long day. That's all it was in solitary. For any of you that might have experienced that, you understand that. But it was during the darkest time of my life when I had to surrender everything because I had nowhere else to go that God started to work through me because I was a tough case. So why am I saying this? Whatever God is having you go through now, and he doesn't cause this. God doesn't cause us to go through this. He doesn't bring pain on us. We live in the real world. I know it's hard. We live in and it's hard to understand why do bad things happen to good people? If we have a loving and merciful and gracious God, why do these things happen? Well, it's all there in the Bible. God says he doesn't promise us heaven on earth. He promises us heaven in heaven. And he says, you're going to go through things in life, but have faith in me, because the end game is what's important here. What's going to happen for all of eternity, because we really are all just passing through here. This is our testing grounds. And so if you're going through a struggle, or you're going through a very rough time right now, remember, there's something deeper going on. God is preparing you for something later on. He may have a great thing for you to do. And remember this, guys. You don't have to have, I said this last night, a mob story. You don't have to go through something as intense as maybe I did. I was a tough case. Your purpose in life might be to bring one person into the kingdom. But remember this, all of heaven rejoices when one person comes into the Lord. Yes. And if that's God's purpose in your life, well, then you fulfilled it. We're on equal ground. You're equal with the pastor, me, and everybody else that's been preaching for 25 years. If you fulfill your purpose, that's it. God's got it different for all of us. So I want to really, leave you with that and make you understand that. And, listen, the other thing that happened that was really a defining moment for me, I have to say this. This was outstanding. My mother-in-law, I talked about it last night for a moment. Well, she died of cancer in 2002, and she developed cancer, and she was staying with me and my wife at that point. And I thought at that point, well, don't worry, Mom, I'm going to cure you. I went through every doctor you can imagine between here and Europe, and I had my mother-in-law on probably 30 or 35 different pills and everything, because I was going to cure her, right? Michael, I can do anything. And she was doing everything good. I was taking her for her chemo treatment. She was living with us at UCLA. And then all of a sudden, she just stopped. She wouldn't take any of the medication. My wife was crying every night. She's very close to her mother. One of 7 kids, all the kids very close, wonderful woman. And so Cammie's saying, Mom, stop. She won't take anything. So I'm taking her to her treatment one morning. I get her in the car, and I says, Mom, she had the bandana on her head. I said, Mom, what are you doing? I said, you stop taking all of it. We're trying to help yourself. All the kids are upset. We're trying to help you. All the kids are upset. You're rejecting everything. What's going on with you? I was mad. I'll never forget, guys. She's sitting there like this, a little smile on her face, And she turns to me, and she looks at me, and she says, Michael, I'm going home. I'm ready to go. And you know what got me? I get the chills right now. There wasn't one hint of fear in that woman. Not one. Her faith was so solid, she absolutely believed with all her heart. She said, I'm going home. She said, I'm ready. She said, my kids are all okay. She said, my husband is a little bit of a crazy guy. She said, but I prayed for him, and I know God's going to answer my prayer. He's going to be okay. She said, I'm going home. I'm ready. That was the, the bravest act of courage I've ever seen in my life. 2 weeks later, she passed away. Peaceful, quiet, nothing. Told her kids, don't worry about it. We're all going home one day. It's my time now. And she passed. And it had such an impression, because I knew how this woman lived her life. And I said, God, there's no way that you just made this so solid for me, knowing how close she was with you and how sure she was. I said, you instilled this woman with that kind of a spirit, and it just cemented my relationship with the Lord. And I'll tell you this, guys, I'm not the best Christian. Look, I'll tell you a quick story. I'm in the gas station, and I'm gassing up my car. I got an SUV. My wife's sitting in the car. My daughter's in the back. It's a couple of years ago. And I'm sitting there, and I get out of the car, and I'm putting gas in. Some other guy comes in. He's got an SUV, parks right next to me, gets out of the car. The little guy, he's about this big. And he comes up, and he looks at me, and he said, you left your car on. Your car is running. We're in a gas station. I said, oh, gosh, I forgot. I'm sorry. These SUVs, you don't hear the engine, right? So I go in, I shut the car off. I come back, and I'm filling up the car, and he's standing there like this. I says, can I help you any further? He said, you corrected me. I turned the car off. He said, why'd you leave it on? I said, what do you mean, why I leave? I told you I forgot. So he says, you forgot? I said, yeah, I forgot. He said, my 5-year-old daughter would give me an asinine excuse like that. I said, oh my gosh, where's this guy going now? I said, I said, look, you didn't come in here to talk to me. Why don't you put gas in your car and get on your way? I says, get going. He looks at me and he says, you're a real blankety blank. He starts cussing me out. I stand there for a second. My first reaction, I wanted to pull the nozzle out of there, put it on him, and light a match, right? That was it. I said, we're gonna handle this old school, right? But I don't do it. All right? I said, my friend, I really want you to get in your car now. I said, this is going to get out of hand. I said, get in your car. I said, and I'm turning my back, and the guy continued, and then within the next second, his wife gets out of the car. She's standing on a running board, and she starts cursing me out. California's crazy. You would have thought I was starting a nuclear explosion in a gas station, right? And man, I'm struggling like this, right? So as I finished putting it, I walked by his car and I said, let me get this guy's license plate number. Maybe I'll catch him in Starbucks one day. I'll be in a better, But I don't do that either. I blank it out. I get in the car. My wife says, what's going on? I said, honey, everything's all right. No worries about it. But yeah, that was my first reaction, right? Because like I said, you could take the boy out of Brooklyn. You can't always take Brooklyn out of the boy. But I will tell you this. My faith is rock solid. Rock solid. Nobody can tell me anything different. I've done the work, guys. I've seen the evidence. I believe it with all my heart and soul. There is nothing that can ever dissuade me from my faith. And that's even in the face of tragedy, because I understand bad things happen to good people. I understand. The Bible is very, very clear. We can't blame God for things that go wrong in our life, because that's just not the way it goes, And so I want anybody that might be struggling or might be wondering, when is God going to answer the call? He is going. He's answering it right now. You just don't realize it. But at some point in time, you will.